Hey, fourth and fifth graders. I'm so glad for those of you that are tuning in for another episode of Sweep. We are very close to the end. We'll finish either this week or probably the beginning of next week. So we're starting to get closer and closer to the climax. When we last left off, Toby had showed Nan how he gets shaved ice. So she had her first ice cream and she's very impressed. And they were in the middle of talking about it. Toby gave Nan an amused smile. "Oh, I take it to mean you like it." Nan felt her face flush, which somehow made it taste even better. She did not want to be impressed, but her face betrayed her. The muscles in her jaw clenched and her mouth twisted into a pursed smile. She couldn't help it. "I do," she said. "You could have this every day if you wanted." Toby wrapped his spoon on the edge of his dish. "Of course, you have to come with me if you want to skip the line." Nan put her spoon down. "You can't do things like that, swiping flowers from graves. It's horrid." Toby laughed. "I don't think anyone will miss them." "The groundskeeper could have caught you, and then what?" She shook her head. "Someday you're going to find yourself in trouble, Toby, and you won't be able to smile your way out of it." Toby's smile soured. "We can't all have magical protectors." Nan's thoughts went back to Christmas Eve when she'd seen Toby asleep under the bridge, so cold, so alone. However hard life with Crud had been, at least she had the other climbers. Toby had no one. "Besides," he clinked the edge of Nan's bowl with his spoon, "take another bite and tell me it wasn't worth it." She took another bite, and another. She worked the bit of cream in her mouth as if it were a piece of mutton. "It's terrifying to think this existed in the world without me knowing it," she said, scraping the last of her ice and licking the dish clean. "Makes me wonder what else I've been missing that's right in front of me." "Indeed." Toby offered her his dish. "You want this one too?" Nan hated herself for accepting, but accept she did. "Thank you," she said, spooning ice into her mouth. Toby did her the kindness of not watching her eat. He leaned against a chimney stack, staring out into the park, grass and trees stretching clear to Kensington Gardens. "If the weather keeps, it'll be a perfect May Day." "I'm still not holding your hand, if that's what this is all about." Nan took another bite. "Oh, it's never about that," Toby said. "But there is a reason I brought you here to this rooftop." He tapped his knuckles against a slate. "This place is called Chesterfield House. It's one of the finest in London. It was built a long time ago by a fella named Isaac Ware." For as much time as Nan spent climbing up and over houses, she didn't give much thought to the men who made them. What's so special about him? "Oh, there's nothing special about him, and that's the point." He widened his eyes. "Story goes that Isaac Ware was a climbing boy just like any other. No learning, no family. One day, some famous building maker sees him out in the street in front of a church, face black, barefoot, and rags. Boy's drawing a picture of a church on the wall with some chalk. He's getting every window and turret just right. The builder's so impressed with the drawing that he hires the boy and trains him as an assistant. Ware grew up to be one of the greatest builders in all England." Nan could tell that Toby wanted her to be impressed. "Well, good for him." She tried to savor the last bit of ice. "What's your point?" Toby shook his head as though she'd said something funny. "You're like Isaac Ware. Miss Bloom sees it. That's why she's taken a shine to you. I've known it my whole life." He was looking right at her. "You're destined for something great, Nan Sparrow." Nan tapped her spoon against the bottom of her dish. "I'm just trying to keep alive." "Keeping alive isn't enough. You have to live for something. You need purpose." Nan shuddered. "Maybe you do, but not me." She was thinking about Charlie, about Miss Bloom's story, about everything. She could feel Toby watching her. "Before I found you in the park, I swung by the house," he said. "You got a tree sticking out of the roof. And also, I noticed something different about Charlie. His arm. It had changed." "Stone." Nan lowered her head. "It turned to stone." "There's something you want to tell me?" "No." Nan wiped a speck from her eye. "I don't know." And before she knew it, she was telling him the whole story. What Miss Bloom had told her about golems, what had happened when Charlie saved her from Crud, what had happened with Dent. "That's quite a tale," Toby said when she had finished. "I'm afraid," Nan said. Afraid I... She shook her head. "What if I can't protect him?" "That's what it is to care for a person," Toby said. There was not even a hint of mocking in his voice. "If you're not afraid, you're not doing it right." It was the last week of April. May Day was just around the bend, and all of the city preparations were being made. Cold pies cooled on racks, garlands filled the market stalls, banners hung between lampposts. Nan and Charlie were at the house enjoying an afternoon together, just the two of them. "Goodbye, cat," Charlie said. "We don't have a cat," Nan said. "Guess again." "Oh, yes," Charlie said. "Only I thought maybe we had a secret cat." He peered around the room. "Goodbye, kitten." "That's the same as a cat," Nan said. "Guess again." They were playing a round of goodbye things. This was a game that Charlie and Nan had invented. One person would look around the room and try to remember everything that was in it. Then that person would close his or her eyes and count as high as possible. Nan could count to 50. Charlie would count to purple. While that happened, the other person would take something from the room and make it disappear. Then the counting person would open his or her eyes, look around the room, and try to guess what had gone away, making guesses by saying, "Goodbye pillow with the yellow stitching," or "Goodbye framed print of the Virgin Islands," or, in Charlie's case, "Goodbye cat." Nan usually won because she could see where Charlie had been from his footprints. Charlie never won because he only guessed animals. Nan was figuring out how to remove a suit of armor without making noise when she heard a pounding at the front window. "Nan!" a voice shouted. "Nan!" "That sounds like Toby," Charlie said. "Maybe he will want to play." Nan ran to the foyer and drew back the curtains. Toby was still pounding against the glass. "Open up!" he said through gasps of air. Nan unlatched the window. "You know you're not supposed to approach the front of the house. Someone might see." Toby grabbed her arm and started to pull her through the window. "You have to follow me," he said in a hoarse voice. "Bring Charlie." Nan pulled back. There was something in his face that she'd never seen before. "Are you mad? We can't take Charlie outside in broad daylight." Toby ignored her. "It's Newt." His eyes were wide. "There's been an accident." Moments later, Nan was sitting with Charlie and Toby inside a rattling cab. Miss Bloom gave me fare for the ride. When the boys told me what had happened, I knew I needed to get you, both of you." Toby closed a gap in the curtain, keeping Charlie hidden from view. "Don't worry about Desmond," he said, nodding to the driver, who had not said a word. "He's a friend." "Where are we going?" Nan had never been inside a carriage before and found the movement slightly nauseating. She gripped Charlie's stone arm. "What happened to Newt?" "Miss Bloom is having him taken to London Hospital. Crud had him sweeping a stack in an iron mill over in Southwark." "Was Roger with him?" She braced herself against the door as the cab turned onto Oxford Street. "I think he'd been sent up on his own," Toby said. "Now that Crud's on the outs with the gentry, he's taking any job that comes along." Nan could not believe what she was hearing. "Newt did a factory alone?" Factory stacks were too wide to scale the regular way. Climbers had to be lowered down on ropes. It was a two-climber job at the very least. "How'd he manage the rigging?" "There was no rigging," Toby said. "He slipped and took a nasty tumble." Nan peered out the carriage window toward the factories across the river. She could see giant brick stacks as tall as steeples belching black smoke into the sky. "How far did he fall?" Toby looked at her, his face pale. "It's bad, Nan." After what felt like an eternity, the carriage rattled to a stop in back of London Hospital. Nan and Charlie followed Toby through a service door that had been propped open. Inside, the hallways were broad and empty. "Miss Bloom had the nurses put Newt in a room where folks wouldn't bother us," Toby said, running up a stairwell. They're just building this wing." He peered into an open doorways as he ran. Nan felt Charlie take her hand. "I do not like this place," he whispered. She squeezed his hand. She didn't like it either. The whole place smelled like gin and bile. It smelled like sickness. Toby motioned to a door at the end of the hall. "He's in here." Nan followed Toby into a dark room lined with beds. The curtains were drawn. There were no doctors or nurses present. Miss Bloom stood in the corner. Whittles and Shilling Tom were with her. They were holding hands. Whittles caught sight of her and his eyes widened. "Nan?" Nan ran toward him. "Where is he?" Miss Bloom turned and met her. "Nan, I'm sorry." Her eyes were rimmed red. Nan ran past her to a bed in the corner. At first she thought the bed was empty. His body was that small. But now she could see that Newt was lying beneath the white sheet. Little Newt with the tiny dark eyes and the tiny little voice. Little Newt who had begged her for stories about the girl in her sweep. Little Newt broken from the fall. "We're here," Nan whispered. "I brought help." She pulled the sheet back from Newt's face. His skin was wet with perspiration, and his eyes were closed. I brought someone who can help you. She grabbed his cool hand. Charlie, she called, we need you. Charlie was still in the doorway, half hidden behind Toby. He looked afraid. Toby led him into the room. Nan heard murmurs as Miss Bloom and the boys stepped back from the bed. What is... This is Charlie, Nan said, glancing up. He's a golem. The woman looked from Nan to Charlie and then back to Nan. Her mouth was open, but no words came from it. Nan thought of all the times that she had pictured Miss Bloom meeting Charlie. None of them were like this. Toby led Charlie to the bed. Charlie seemed confused. Where is Newt? He said, looking at all the faces, all of them staring at him. Nan wondered who among them was the most frightened. Nan nodded at Newt's bed. That's him. Charlie peered at the bed for a moment. Then realization dawned on his face. He's very small. His voice was shaking. Is he an accident? Nan took Charlie's hands in her own. One soot, one stone. Charlie, listen to me. I know I told you about helping, but now you have to try. Tears stung and blurred her eyes. You have to save him. Do you understand? Charlie nodded and looked at Newt. You want me to wake him? Please. Nan let go of his hands and stepped back. She forced herself not to think about what would happen to Charlie, how much of him she might lose. Miss Bloom moved close to Nan. What is he doing? Shh, Nan said. Just wait. Nan watched, hardly breathing, as Charlie leaned close to Newt. The golem placed his crumbling gray hand on Newt's pale, clammy hand. Charlie closed his eyes and breathed slowly. Nan could feel the heat kindling inside Charlie's breath. It warmed the room. His hand smoldered and began to glow. Come back, Newt, she whispered. Come back. Charlie strained his face, and his hand burned brighter. But nothing happened. At last the golem opened his eyes. He won't. I can't help him. He let go of Newt's hand. It fell limp on the bed. No, Nan said. You have to try harder. You have to help him, Charlie. Nan felt Miss Bloom's hand on her shoulder. I tried to tell you, Nan, she said gently. William died in the carriage on the way to the hospital. Nan looked at her. She looked at the faces of Whittles and Shilling Tom. They had fresh tears in their eyes. Dead? She felt her chin quiver. She felt as if her legs might give way beneath the weight of it all. Newt wasn't supposed to die. He couldn't die. He had to live with Lady Wilde. They had to survive and be happy. He had to be a little boy. I'm sorry. Charlie lowered his head. I wanted to help him. Nan realized that for all of his gifts, this was one thing that Charlie could not do. He could not bring back the dead. Nan put her arms around Charlie. She could feel him trembling. She buried her face in his chest. She held him with everything she had. I know you tried, she whispered. Goodbye, Newt, he said. Goodbye, Newt, she said. And we'll read more tomorrow. Bye, everyone.